Visited in a dream. I have a friend who passed away a little over a year ago from suicide. Still don't think it was on purpose, but it happened, and nothing can change that. I knew him since we were in elementary school, and he was dating one of my really good friends for a long time. I was staying at his house for about a month after he passed, in his room where he passed, with his ex-girlfriend, my friend. They redid the room and got a new bed and everything, but lots of pictures and memorabilia of him. So we're sleeping, everything is fine, but I have a dream where it's him, myself, and my friend. We're in a very crowded area. It was like a field with lots of other people, but it was just us that I was focused on. He was talking to me saying, "Be careful. Just be careful. You need to be careful." I started off quiet and muffled, but as he kept saying it, it got louder and more clear. That was it. That was the dream. Not sure why I needed to be careful. I still haven't figured that out yet. So fast forward about 2 weeks ago, my boyfriend of 6 months has a family member who passed away a few years back. I never got to meet them, just seen pictures and heard stories and whatnot. Now, my boyfriend and I got into our biggest fight yet, and I was really upset about it because I wasn't sure what the outcome for our relationship was. So, as I'm sleeping that night, I have a dream, and in this dream, I'm in the same crowded field area, surrounded by lots of people who I paid no attention to, with this family member I've never met. Same thing as the dream I had with my friend. He was talking, but it was quiet and muffled. As he kept talking, though, it was more clear and louder, and he said, "It's okay. It's going to be okay. Everything is okay. It's all okay." I remember exactly what his family member was wearing in this dream, and everything. Now, I don't know what his voice is supposed to sound like, as I've never met him before, but I told my boyfriend about it, who doesn't really believe in it too much, but he seemed happy that he came to me. It was a strange experience, especially since when I dreamt of my friend, it took place in the same exact place as the dream with my boyfriend's family member. Haunted popular restaurant. Now, I've been here for 5 years. I always heard stories, but it was never a big deal. Until about the 6th month of working here, when I had an experience myself. The girls' bathroom is the hot spot here. We did have a guy die of a heart attack here years ago, but that's the only death that has happened here. I remember going into the bathroom while we were closed, and no one else was in there, and the paper towel machine was going off. It's an automatic. When you pull one, it produces another one for you to grab. And there were paper towels on the ground. Next, it was myself, my manager, and one of the other girls in the building. We were closed and just waiting for my manager to be done and have an after-work drink. My manager is a guy, but he was walking out of the kitchen with myself and the other employee. As he was shutting the lights off to the kitchen, we heard a very deep man's voice yell, "Hey!" from the back of the kitchen. We all kind of looked at each other, said, "Forget having a drink," and left. Then, another incident in the bathroom. My friend and I were going in there so she could braid my hair. We weren't open yet, and we went into the handicap stall for more room. While we were walking into the bathroom, we heard a toilet flush, and we thought it was one of my managers using the bathroom, so we said hi when we were walking in. Nobody was there, and there was not automatic toilets. They're the ones that you have to physically push with the long silver handle. Another one. I was using the bathroom, There are 3 stalls in there. When you walk in, you're facing the handicap one, then one in the middle, and one in the far right. I always use the one on the far right unless it's being used. So while I was in there, I heard a noise, kind of like a bouncing noise when a door double bounces when it's being closed. Didn't think much of it until I came out and I'm washing my hands and I see the straps and the changing table swinging, located in the handicap stall, and realized the sound was the changing table being pushed open. My most recent one was today. I came in at 11:30. There's only about 1 table in the restaurant since we open at 11, and it's not very busy the day after Christmas. So I hang my coat up and go into the bathroom to put my hair up. As I'm looking into the mirror, I notice the middle stall door is closed. No big deal. They can be closed without being latched. But I seen a shadow moving between the cracks. So I figured someone was in that stall. I used my normal stall, do my business, and realized that nobody is in the one next to me because I didn't see their feet. Again, no big deal. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me since I woke up only an hour before coming in. So I'm washing my hands and my back is to the middle stall. As I turn around and face that stall, I see what I assume to be a shadow figure peeking its head above the stall door, staring at me. I didn't even dry my hands. I hightailed it out of that bathroom and will use the bathroom when I get home in a few hours. There are more stories that have happened to others. I just don't have the time to put them down right now. I heard her say, "Uh-oh." So this, much like my incident with the ghost of the Civil War nurse, isn't going to be some grand epic. It isn't going to be some, "and then I saw a ghost" type thing. I honestly wish it was, as those things make for a better retelling, and they're harder to dispute. Anyway, for a bit of a backstory, I live in a small southern city with history dating back to the Civil War. The apartment building I call home, and have called home for almost 4 years now, was built in 1936 to be apartments, instead of existing as a house first, only to then be converted into apartments. The walls and floors in this place are tremendously paper thin, as I can hear my downstairs neighbor's TV and my downstairs neighbor if she's talking loud enough. There's squirrels in the walls that I can hear scrabbling from time to time, and I can hear every time the front door opens and shuts. Generally, people slam it. I say all that to say, yes, I know there's rational, logical explanations for all sorts of things. I'm sure there's a logical explanation for the heavy footsteps I sometimes hear in my downstairs neighbor's apartment, which sounds like she puts on her heaviest pair of hiking boots, which I would be surprised if she even owns, in paces, doing her best to stomp heavily with every step. I'm sure there's a logical explanation for the knocking I'll hear sometimes on the bathroom wall, which sounds very much like my other neighbor is rapping his knuckles against his side of the wall. I'm even sure there's a logical explanation for the shadow of the arm I'm sure I saw in my kitchen once, and only once, back in 2020. Staring at it, I was from the living room. I'm sure there's a logical explanation for any and all little creepy things that have happened while I've lived here. I can find no explanation for this next part. This was about a week ago. I was about to go to sleep, sitting on the couch. I sleep on my couch because the living room is the only room I can somewhat climate control, be it through heaters or fans, and playing some solitaire to sort of relax. It was a particularly noisy evening that night. The train was whistling and groaning as it made its way down the tracks. The squirrels were scrabbling in the walls, and I could hear one of my neighbors moving around. In truth, I was a little unnerved by all the noise, but then in the middle of everything, I hear it. Uh-oh. It was a small voice, toneless, either a young woman or a child. It wasn't muffled, didn't sound like it was coming from a TV or from one of my neighbors. It sounded like it was coming from the kitchen or my bedroom. I stop, paralyzed, listening, and hear nothing else. Ever since then, I've heard nothing else and have no explanation for it. There's no grand ghost story attached to this place. The only thing that comes close being a half-remembered story of the old landlord about some little girl going missing here at some point. Even he hadn't heard about it himself. I had only heard about it from a woman doing research for a ghost walk. It could be nothing, and I probably won't hear anything else, just like the Civil War nurse at my college. But I know what I heard. I know what it wasn't, even if I don't know what it was. That's what counts, right? Weeping Woman. So I've mentioned before how my town has a lot of Civil War history. This is despite the small hang-up that only a few buildings actually managed to survive the war. The rest were torn down to build barricades along the river, as the town itself changed hands on more than one occasion. One of the few remaining buildings in question is an old bank, technically the oldest in the state, though not the oldest operating one. It was built in 1833, though almost immediately went bankrupt, and now Bankless Bank, serving as everything from a private residence to a hospital during the war before finally managing to actually be used as a bank again, though even that wouldn't last very long. It's a museum now, the one not too far removed from where I lived, close enough that I'll walk to it sometimes. I'm friendly with the people who run it and have given some tours to friends who have dragged down there. There are a few ghost stories associated with the bank, though arguably the most famous is that of the Weeping Woman. A woman who would have one son go fight for the North and the other for the South. Both boys ended up dying, and though they died on different days in different battles, news reached the woman of their deaths on the same day. There's a mirror in the downstairs portion of the bank that's actually originally from the bank when it was first built. It's used now for prom and wedding pictures, and supposedly, every once in a while, a picture will get ruined by the audition of the person in the mirror. A woman dressed in all black. I wish I could say that I have a picture of the woman, and that the story is about the circumstances around that picture, but unfortunately, I don't. There's another part of that ghost story, though, that sometimes the woman can be heard weeping over the deaths of her sons. I was in the museum about 4 months ago, showing it to a friend of mine, and he dropped back while the lady who normally oversaw it was explaining something to another couple of guests. I'm standing there, listening, and then I hear it. It sounded distinctly like a woman openly weeping, coming from somewhere, just a little ways away. I thought it might have been outside, but then someone opened the door, and the noise didn't get any louder. Glancing over at my friend, it was clear he didn't hear anything, and after a while, the noise went away. No one else in the building heard it, though the lady in charge had told me several stories about unusual things happening to her, plates breaking, small noises, all sorts of things. A couple months pass, and then during a Christmas celebration at the bank, I heard the woman telling the story of the Weeping Woman to a couple people who had just asked about the ghosts. I got to be part of that story as I leaned in and told them that I myself had heard it. I've yet to hear it again, as I've gone back to try, but I know what I heard. There's a ghost story around that old bank, and I'm now part of it. heard the sound of a crash. As stated in several other of my posts, I live in a small southern city with a lot of Civil War history. About 2 months ago, I set out to put together a book of the city's ghost stories, as, at least to my knowledge, no one else has done so. This has led to a lot of foot research, a lot of questions, and 1 or 2 mistakes. My sincerest apology to that one story when I told you your place was haunted. I hadn't realized I was in the wrong place. One of the more prevalent ghost stories I've come across so far was everybody seems to know some version of it. Is that a little girl who fell through the skylight of a grocery store in the 1930s, hit her head on a Coke machine, and died the next day. It's one of the few ghost stories I've come across for the book that's rooted in history, as the little girl did actually fall. I've seen a photograph of her. I've read newspaper articles about it, and I visited her grave. A lot of the finer points of the actual event seem to have gotten mixed up in the retelling of it, though as I've heard people talk about the little girl falling through a window instead of a skylight and pointing to other buildings on the street as the one she'd fallen out of. Supposedly, her ghost doesn't haunt the site of the former grocery store, but the buildings on the other side of it too. Anyway, I was going for a walk one morning early, as I often do. Heading down the street, I was thinking of the cold of the weather, of a half dozen other things besides the ghost story about the little girl. I was walking by a series of shops when I heard the noise, a terrific sounding crash. Jumping, startled, I whirled towards the sound of the noise, only to find myself standing in front of the exact building the girl had fallen into. It's a jewelry store now, or at least will be until they move out soon. And admittingly, it could have just been someone working inside who dropped something. Still, the place didn't open for another 2 hours, and it was fairly early in the morning. I almost looked in, probably should have looked in, but didn't, just in case it was one of the workers and not a ghost. I went on my way, rather shaken up, and have yet to hear anything else, no matter how many times I walked by the building. So, did I hear the ghostly replaying of that tragic accident? Or just the mishandling of a clumsy employee? I don't know, and probably never know, but that doesn't mean I won't quit hoping to hear it again. The Dare of a Dark Walker. In 2016, I was in my summer house in autumn alone, and I was watching a TV series with my headset at night. I wasn't sure about the time, but it was probably 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. Only one old neighbor next to my house is staying there for almost 4 seasons. He was most probably sleeping during those hours. Anyway, I don't want to make the story long, so I'm going to dive into it real quick. What a coincidence that I was watching the Game of Thrones 4 episodes in a row. The White Walker is about to come to the scene. I needed to stop the show and I felt very, very thirsty indeed, so I walked like 4 steps to fill my glass. I was not under any substance or drug. I remember the window next to my sofa was closed, but not so sure, and the single window is looking at the back of our house that has a small garden, and right after the garden wall, there's a big garden which is very, very dark. The big garden has lots of pine trees and is separated by quite a distance from each other. The moment I was sipping from my glass, I couldn't swallow because I heard a footstep from the back of my house, from the garden. That footstep, or big animal step, or something that freaked me out, and I could feel my heartbeat in my ear. Something out there crunched a bunch of dry leaves, or a single big one. I panicked and ran through the window. I opened the curtain and saw something 10 meters away stop and look at me and there was pure silence. I assumed that was a tall guy, maybe not even a human, who was staring at me from the garden. I can't see his body or face because the moonlight was very strong in the dark, hitting the guys between two trees slightly behind. All I could do was just make the noise coming out from my lungs with a long duration, like hush or kind of a snake. I have no idea what kind of reaction is. After that, I opened almost every light around me and tried to find something sharp or knives. I couldn't control my heartbeat or stay calm. I heard something outside, and this time it was from the side and a cat trying to catch bats on her dinner table. So I say, okay, it's a cat. I closed the curtain of the glass door, and all of a sudden, one of the dinner table chairs dropped on the floor, and something hit the glass door intensely. A couple of quick steps, and I opened the curtain, and that cat was looking at me, eye to eye. I open the door and say, damn it. I walk with my knives outside. The knives were blunt, like a double sword. I was showing off and trying to be a tough guy or something, but there's no way you can see a damn thing in the dark behind a bunch of flowers and trees from the open balcony. The dinner table location. I said, what's going on here? And couldn't forget, because the thing was very big, calm, and cold without even breathing. I was 23 years old at that time. And if I didn't take my headset off and gone for a drink, this thing probably would have come too close. Very weird stuff has been happening in my room. I live with my grandparents during the weekdays and return to my parents on the weekend. It's a work-related thing. While staying at my grandparents' house, I've had numerous of supernatural, I believe, encounters. One night, while sleeping on my toiletry bag, fell on the ground. There's no way it could have fallen due to the secure fashion I placed it in. Then one morning, I wake up and some shorts are in front of my heater. The kind of heater that blows out hot air and can be hazardous if something gets too close. One night, I wake up to the fear-instilling sound of someone sitting down in my gaming chair. It's very loud because there's some hole and air escapes when you sit, and it's very loud. It makes a squeaky sound. Just 2 nights ago, my box fan that requires you to twist the knob from level 0 to 3 to change the levels of spinning was turned on by itself. Not to the level next to 0, but 2 levels, which means that it didn't just accidentally switch on. Just now, I saw something that looked very similar to if you had the sun reflecting rays on your phone and you could blind someone. I was looking at it. Then when I was about to touch it, it flew away. First time that's ever happened to me. Can someone give me insight to what particular being is doing this and what exactly I should do? I'm not scared of them, but it's just perplexing. Spirits attempted to warn me about a suicide that would take place. I moved into an apartment 7 months ago after living with my foster parents for 17 years. For context, it was 2 days before my graduation. For more context, I'm still with CFS, and I live in a supervised building for girls, and I'm enrolled in a program to live on my own without staff and a roommate, but I still have supports like grocery money given to me, and my rent is paid. Some background. Rules of living with my parents. Not allowed to be on the phone unless I ask. Not allowed to keep a phone at night. Internet goes off at 8, except on weekends, where it would go off at 9. Only certain days I'm allowed to be on my phone and at certain times. Example. Sundays, Mondays, and Wednesdays are 6 to 7:30 p.m. Friday and Saturdays are 6 to 8:30 p.m., sometimes 9 if my dad was being nice. Even if it was my phone that I bought with my money, I'm still not allowed to keep it with me during the day and night. It goes in my parents' room until the next day, where I can be on it. Not allowed to bring a phone to school, so after I moved out, I texted my boyfriend all the time to make up for all the lost time. One night, a few days after my 18th birthday, I was told I was getting a roommate, and I had already been living in the building without a roommate for a few weeks. The whole time, I had the suite to myself. I had an eerie feeling of being watched all the time. My then roommate went by they, them pronouns, so I'll be referring to them as that. I was at my boyfriend's house when I got the news, so I wasn't there when they initially moved in. However, they went to their grandma's house for evening, and I was in my room sending my boyfriend audio messages on Snapchat. Me being me, I was talking about weird shit. He sent one back and he said, "What the fuck the noise at the beginning?" He knows that I sometimes scare easily, so I thought he was playing. But I played back the audio, and at the beginning, a few seconds before I start talking, you can hear a growl, then a deep sigh. Keep in mind, I was talking as the sigh was happening, and the growl kept going while I was talking. I flipped out and ran out of my room. I got him to screen record the message, and I have it saved still. I texted my roommate to the point where they actually responded really fast. They would either leave me on red or just eat and just wouldn't open it. I told them what happened and sent them the recording. When they got back, I was given sage by another girl in the building, and we smudged the room. After we smudged, we were sitting in the living room, and my peripheral vision, I could see a light flickering. I turned my head, and my fucking lights in my room were flickering. Got my phone out and started recording. I was asking it to please stop. It kept going. As soon as I said, "Stop it," it stopped flickering. Other shit would happen within the following months. Weeks and later after both challenged it, and out of nowhere my roommate gets violently sick. What we didn't know was what was going on later in that month was a staff member was going to commit suicide. The girls who knew her were devastated, but there was a darkness throughout the whole building. My auntie's mom, an adopted mom, came to the apartment, and she smudged. And again the light started flickering. She said that it was the spirits letting us know that this was going to happen. I honestly thought it was over, all the scary shit. However, there was something that changed my roommate. One night I was in my room watching TV before bed, and all of a sudden they started screaming and pounding on my door. I opened the door and they looked absolutely terrified. I asked them what had happened, and they said they saw someone in the bathroom and thought it was me because it was the same height as me. But when they went back to their room and then go look in the bathroom again, it was gone. They said they heard creaking in the bathroom. After they saw that figure, they knew it wasn't me because they said, "Why the fuck would she hide in the bathroom? She wouldn't fucking do that because she's chicken shit." Just crazy shit like that happens. The Thing in the Woods. This happened to me 2 days ago at my family's cabin in the middle of nowhere. My sister snores loud, so I usually sleep in the trailer beside her garage. Also, note that my mom leaves the door unlocked, but she goes to bed by 11 p.m. It was around 11:30, and I was sitting in the trailer, and I kept hearing a sound that sounded like a fingernail being dragged across the window. I got up and checked to make sure the door was locked. Nothing was open, so I ruled it as my imagination. When 12 came around, I was just about to nod off when my blankets were ripped off my body. Me, sitting in fear, shot up and looked out the window to see if my mom was still up. To my dread, the lights were off. I grabbed my flashlight and looked out the window one last time. What I saw next changed my life. Standing there, looking at me, was a tall black figure. It was inhuman by how tall it was. It was holding something bloody. I don't know what the hell it was. I didn't know what to do. I told my mom and she said that it was my imagination. I swear on my life what I'm seeing is real. For the rest of the night, I jumped at every sound, and the next morning, there was a trail of blood leading into the woods. Someone help. My family's going back there tomorrow. I've been looking for a chance to post this somewhere and ask about this. This happened to me about 2 years ago. I saw something I can't explain, and it wasn't during sleep. I was walking home one night, around like 1 a.m., and it wasn't a person. I was walking just past an intersection of streets on a residential portion of town, and then all of a sudden, I felt like something was wrong, like very wrong. Like that queasy in your gut kind of dread. I stop walking and look around, and I'm just uncomfortable. After a few moments, from down one of the streets, there's this just big 2D shape, like a very rough rectangle, just slowly moving toward me. At first, I thought it was just a big sheet blowing in the wind. I started walking down a street perpendicular to the one the shape was coming down. But still, I felt like I had to look at it, so I stopped. And once I realized this wasn't a bed sheet, this shit froze me in my tracks. It was just this big, giant rectangle, not perfect, and roughly 6 or 8 feet high by maybe 10 or 12 feet in length. It moved into the intersection finally, and just stopped there. It couldn't have been a shadow. Trust me, this shit was not a shadow. It wasn't falling over things, it blocked them completely, and was always the same weird shape. The intersection had a light over it, and this is the middle of the intersection. From the moment it entered the light and floated in the center, I couldn't think, I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. I wasn't scared. I've been scared before. Scared could not even remotely come close to what I was feeling. I've never felt sheer terror before. And the weird thing was it was for no damn reason. It was just a shape floating there. But it registered in my brain that I needed to get away from this thing, like right fucking now. I turned and ran. I've never ran so hard or fast anywhere. It was going so slow, there was no way it could catch up. But that didn't stop me from sprinting about 2 miles back to my house. I didn't look back once, but I really wish I did. I've been trying to figure out what it was or what I could have seen, whether it was a shadow person or it was my mind playing some horrible and very elaborate trick. Sorry this got so long, I just got excited at the prospect of telling this and getting some input. Ghosts in the cafe. I own and operate a cafe out in LA. The building has a lot of history in a neighborhood where many deaths have occurred. Prior to me being in the building, the energy that filled the space was completely different, more chaotic. It's a very chill atmosphere now, and a beacon of light in the community. Anyhow, at the beginning of the night, after the customers have left, and I'm writing or just reflecting, I'll hear various noises. Undeniable, loud noises like doors closing and even pieces of conversations that sound very ghostly. I'm not the only one to experience these sounds either. Multiple people have heard the spirits as well at the same time. A few nights ago, I had burned some Palo Santos and lit a candle as I wrote a very thunderous poem in the cafe. I was very into it, and I could get the chills of me reciting it out loud, feeling very proud of the expression I was exuding. As I got up from my chair, I blew out the candle as some of the ashes from the Palo Santos hit the ground. At that very moment, I hear a chair scoot very loudly as if a customer was getting up to leave. It was so in my face, obvious, like the spirit wanted me to definitely acknowledge its presence. I was a little freaked out at first, as I was the only one there, but quickly calmed by curiosity that had me investigate to make sure I was indeed the only one there, and surely enough, I was. I've chosen to no longer be afraid, but just accept whatever may be floating around in the unseen, adding a flavor to the energy of the cafe. Perhaps it is there to assist me in some way. Entity touched my phone. I haven't had an experience like the one I had last night in a very long time. I would always see spirits, ghosts, shadow figures. It calmed down greatly years ago when I started smoking weed. I've since stopped, and my dreams have been utterly ridiculous, but the paranormal contact has slowly come back as well. In the middle of having a very lucid dream last night, I woke up for some reason in the middle of the dream and saw an odd-looking entity of some sort standing by my bed with its hand on my phone. My phone was on the bed near my leg, and I had a pair of overalls hanging from the top of the wooden bed beam, which the entity was in front of. After about 3 seconds of looking at it and trying to figure out what the hell was going on, it instantly disappeared, like it pressed a button. At that point, my hanging overalls came back into view. I didn't feel any malicious energy from it, just very startled with my heart beating. It was extremely creepy. Earlier that day, I found that someone had taken one of my older phones and spent an hour looking for it, feeling very irritated that I couldn't find it. Then ironically, an entity puts its hand on my newer phone. I was awake out of the dream state. I wonder if they can draw energy from phones, or perhaps it was telling me not to worry about my phone. I don't know. I need some help interpreting what me and my girlfriend experienced last night. So I just moved in with my girlfriend's dad and stepmother. I'm from the US, and for a while, me and my girlfriend were in a long-distance relationship. I've been recently moved to Sweden, and just about 3 days ago, I started staying in a spare room in my girlfriend's dad's house. The first night I was here, I woke up in the middle of the night and heard the sliding door to the storage room, connected to mine, rattling back and forth on its tracks, and slightly tapping the wall. When I walked up to the door, I could see it slightly moving back and forth. My room is downstairs and sits underground, so I chalked it up to vibrations somewhere causing the movement. I checked the room and then opened and shut the door. After that, I went to sleep, and I assumed the noises stopped. The next day, me and my girlfriend slept through the night without incident, but in the morning, I found a torn salt packet on my dresser with some of its contents on the table and floor. I asked my girlfriend, but she swears she hadn't put it there, and I don't see why anyone else would. The weirdest occurrence was definitely last night. I'm typically a skeptical person, but I know I felt the presence of something last night. My girlfriend woke up early this morning to head off to school, and before she left, she said that she saw something last night. I remember her waking me up in the middle of the night and complaining that I wasn't giving her enough space. According to her, when this happened, she saw a black figure standing at the edge of our bed. She said that she thought it was me at first, and she was trying to figure out how and when I stood up so quickly. But when she realized that I was on the bed, it seemed like it had almost crouched to pick something up and then turned around and walked away before disappearing. She said she went back to sleep because it felt non-threatening and it hasn't worried her at all. After she left for school, I went back to sleep for a few hours. I had a quick bout of sleep paralysis, but the sensations I had during it were very strange. I've experienced sleep paralysis before, but never anything like this. I felt unable to move and I could barely breathe. But the weirdest part of it all is that I literally felt like someone was laying on top of me and caressing my face and running its fingers through my hair. At first I was relaxed because I thought it was my girlfriend. Like it literally felt like my girlfriend, but once I realized she had already left for school, I started to panic. I couldn't breathe anymore. It felt like the force was also imposing itself on me, almost angry that I was upset, and almost felt like I was having to fight for control with this entity inside of my head. Once I regained control over myself, it felt like I literally felt the energy detach from me and race away in the direction of the storage room. I took a quick glance in the room around me and saw nothing, so I went back to sleep on account of the fact that I was really tired. When I woke up, I started thinking about it a little more, and now I'm really scared because I have to sleep alone tonight. Basically, I'm looking for advice or an interpretation. I know my girlfriend said it felt non-threatening, and for me, it did at first as well, but it appears to me that it was literally trying to mimic my girlfriend, and my girlfriend had mistaken the entity for me. To me, it almost feels like something evil trying to present itself in a form that it knew each of us would feel comfortable with in order to trick us. I'm going to smudge the air with sage and Palo Santo, and I won't be able to until either tomorrow or this weekend. Not looking forward to sleeping alone tonight, or any of the nights that I have to for that matter. I, male 22, am going to college in Ohio. I live in a fraternity house that used to belong to the town. The school buys out properties and houses students in them. My house has been displaying some interesting encounters. Last year, around February or March, one of my housemates and I were talking in the hallway outside our bathroom. We were there for at least 30 minutes. Bathroom was empty. No one went in or out. Then the shower suddenly turned itself on. For context, the shower handle is the one that points at the ground when off and rotates counterclockwise to turn it on. We looked at each other and went to check it out. The handle was turned 90 degrees counterclockwise. I turned it off, and we resumed our conversation. Last semester, around September, I was at esports practice. One of my friends had sent me a Snapchat of my room from the outside, asking what I was doing. When I opened the photo, there was a figure standing in my room. This was more concerning considering my room is a single, and I'm the only one with a key, outside of skeleton keys kept by campus security. At this point, we had assumed it was just the spirit of the old man who, conveniently enough, passed away in the room that I'm in. At the end of last semester, around December, my girlfriend, female 20, and I were sitting on my bed talking. We heard a voice outside the door. Both of our heads snapped in that direction, as it was either a young or female voice, and the rest of the house was male. When we asked the others about it, who were all downstairs, no one was outside my door. They all swear they didn't hear anything or do anything. A few weeks ago, I, my girlfriend, one of my frat brothers, and his girlfriend were in the living room playing Mario Kart when there was a sudden loud bang. We all went to check it out. The shower curtain rod had fallen from its fastened spot. 2 years living there, and it never fell before. Finally, last night was one of the weirdest. I heard the same voice from last December, and it was trying to speak to me inside my own head. There was what seemed to be radio interference, best I can describe, as it kept cutting out. It began to imitate sounds outside. I'd hear a car drive by, then a few moments later, hear a distorted version of it in my head. After this went on for a while, it screamed at me, "Fucking listen!" I hadn't planned on discussing this, hoping it was a dream, until my girlfriend told me she heard a growl this morning and asked if I'd experienced anything. Our conclusion as of now is that there are two spirits in the house: the old man, who is peaceful, and whatever this other thing is. Any assistance on identifying it or general advice would be welcome. Thank you in advance to everyone's help. Updated. Information as of February 22nd, 2023. My fraternity brother, male 20, his girlfriend, female 19, my girlfriend and I took turns going under the Estes method. We got some partial information when the other three were under, but the spirit seemed to be extremely happy to speak to me, as it yielded the most responses. This is going to sound weird, and I'm still having trouble processing it all, but it seems like the spirit wants me. I'm not sure exactly what it means by that, but it definitely doesn't sound good. For example, when I asked, "What do you want?" the spirit would respond, "Him," whilst I was under. My girlfriend has a somewhat special connection to energy. I don't know the official term, but she's an empath and feels that she can control how the energy flows through her. I don't know if I'm even describing that correctly. She's been using her energy to protect me, and the spirit knows it. It repeatedly was telling her to leave the room, leave the house, and not to come back. We tested having her leave the room, and the aggressiveness increased, resulting in my quitting when I heard a voice scream, "He will be mine!" Chilled to the bone, I removed the headphones and blindfold and called the session to a stop. Since doing the Estes method about a week ago, most of the activity has died off, with the exception of things occasionally falling off of their sound resting places, the TV randomly turning on or off or pausing, and I'm having a hard time staying asleep. A few days ago, my girlfriend and I both tested positive for COVID, although I doubt it's connected to the spirit. Definitely has not helped settle my nerves, and we're now quarantined to my room. Hopefully, this added info helps anyone who might have any idea what's going on, or the previous commenters with additional thoughts of what to try next. In high school, me and my friends started and ran a paranormal investigators club. We were lame, and it was mostly just an excuse to hang out. We did have a mild interest in ghosts, and our town and school had plenty of urban legends to go off of. We didn't get permission from the school to have activities outside of campus, and we couldn't go into any buildings that had urban legends surrounding them, so we were stuck outside of buildings on campus at night. So we had a bunch of outings. We were taking photos of random things, looking for orbs. There were a lot, but I was never able to "Oh my God, that's a ghost." So one day we got our hands on a tape recorder. We had ourselves a little seance. We formed a circle, did a generic greeting to any spiritual things that might be present, and included some instructions. We were going to leave the tape on for 2 minutes, and the group was going to be silent. This was a Friday night. After the tape, we packed it up and went home. Our next club meeting was the following Tuesday. Our teacher, chaperone, endorsement was a nice guy, but not anything special as far as teachers go. You know the type. So we sit down and start talking, and the teacher tells us that we should probably listen to the tape. So we fire it up. Everything is going exactly like we remembered. Silence begins. About 45 seconds and the tape screeches, makes a sound like it's speeding up. And then in a low, gravelly voice we hear, "Get out." Tape screeches again and resumes. Entire 2 minutes of silence accounted for. I don't know what to make of this event. All I know is I don't believe the tape was doctored. I don't think the teacher had the skills to do so. It was physical tape, not digital. And the recorder was probably older than I was. It might not have been a big deal to just go over and tape over the silence, but I don't think that accounts for the strange sounds the tape made. A few months after my grandpa died, I was chilling with some friends in a hot tub, drinking, and we got onto the subject of my grandpa and his passing. I told them stories he told me of him fighting in World War I and World War II and how badass he was. Well, I go out to pee because I'm not a fucking animal who pees in the hot tub and go inside. On the small table outside the bathroom is a few pictures of myself and my parents, my grandpa and my grandma, and one of the only photos we have of my grandpa in a uniform in Germany. It's the only one that's face down. I figure one of us must have drunkenly knocked it down, or one of the cats was fucking about. So I flipped it back and went back on my business. About 20 minutes later, had to refresh the beer, go back inside, and the photo is now the only one standing. All other photos are down. I flip them back up and figure one of my friends is messing with me. Go back outside and tell them what happened, and no one admitted to it. Everyone had been pissing outside the tub into a snowbank off the porch, confirmed by off-color snow. I tell them to be serious with me, because it's actually disrespectful of my grandpa's memory to mess with his photo and my family's photos like that, and everyone confirmed that they weren't fucking with them. I had been the only one going inside to piss and get beers, always getting for friends too, so this was odd. I go back in again, and this time I've consciously made note that no one had entered or exited the house since the last time I came out. All the pictures have been placed on the floor face down, except for my uniformed grandpa, and the photos upside down in the frame. In my late teens, I had nightmares quite frequently. That may not be the most accurate term, but it fits to me. They were semi-lucid dreams, and so far as I knew, I wasn't awake, but I couldn't control what was happening. The nightmares were always different experiences, but I had the same objective in each one: save as many people as I can from what's happening. People around me would be dying from a fire, or being shot, or a wild animal would be killing them, and I'd have to sacrifice myself to try to save them. The thing was, there was always this thing in my dreams with me. Once it was a doctor with no face, another time it was a bear. I even remember it being the front door to my house once. Whatever it was, it always had the same foreign feeling. I don't think I created it in my mind. I honestly think it came in. It would always be in the wrong place at the wrong time and hinder my objective in the nightmare. The thing would ensure my nightmare took the worst turn possible. Then I would get sacrificed in some way and die. I wouldn't wake up like you normally do when the bad thing gets you, though. It would continue until I experienced my own death, pain included. Then I'd stand up, as a ghost maybe? I still don't quite understand how or why. And just have an overwhelming need to scratch myself somewhere. I'd claw at my leg or back or face, and the dream would end shortly after that. The next morning, I'd wake up to scratch marks on my body where I scratched myself in the dream. It always freaked me out, but then the dreams went away. Then one night, I had a really bad one. I couldn't die. I couldn't scratch itch, and I was getting afraid. My wife and girlfriend at the time tried waking me up. She says I wouldn't wake up, but I was crying. I vividly remember her waking me up and me being unable to move with a giant shadow looming over our bed. I don't think I'll ever forget that helplessness feeling. I I told her about it the next morning and came clean about the scratches. She had asked about them before. After that night, though, I didn't have the nightmares anymore. They just went away. Last year, I found out my wife had talked to the father of her church, who agrees to come to our apartment and bless the place. I guess he spent 45 minutes in the bedroom, and she said she had an uneasy feeling the whole time. I can't say it was paranormal, and not just my imagination and me scratching myself in my sleep, but the piece that bugs me is that him blessing our place without my knowledge and the nightmares going away after that. I'm not exactly a religious man, but what the actual fuck? My wife and I were living at my grandma's house. It's a very large house, and we had the entire upstairs. My wife and I were in the master bedroom, and our 3-year-old daughter was in the front bedroom across the hall from us. We had one of those new fancy baby monitors that had the breathing sensor and all that. Primarily, if our daughter tossed wrong, the stupid thing went off. But we kept on with it as we were new parents. One night while trying to go to sleep, my wife and I were lying in bed talking about the week's happenings, basically just shooting the shit till we got tired enough to go to sleep. We finally stopped talking and were ready to go to sleep, so we turned up the baby monitor so it would be loud enough to wake us if the alarm sounded, or if our daughter started crying for some reason or another. As I lay there trying to nod off, I heard what I thought was breathing over the monitor, adult breathing. It was kind of distorted, like bad reception, so I would listen more carefully to be sure it wasn't malfunctioning. I heard my daughter moving around, and that came through clear, so I figured it was just some interference with the monitor. However, a few moments later, I heard clear as day over the monitor an older woman's voice saying, "Shh, it's okay," in a very soft, almost comforting tone. However, being a new father living where I did, I freaked out. Leaping out of bed, thinking that someone is in my daughter's room about to kidnap her or something, I ran through the hall and burst into her room. Her room was near pitch black, but for the little toy thing we had in her crib, it would give a constant soft glow, and there was noise from it. Be a kick, a cry, it would turn on and move and play soft music. That was in the middle of its song. My daughter appeared sound asleep and no one was in the room. Figuring I must have dreamt the voice, I walked over to pick up my daughter to comfort her, and myself at this point. When I picked her up, I noticed that she was very, very warm. I checked her temperature, and it was a dangerous 103 degrees. Now, before we put her in bed, she was fine. Only 3 hours had passed. Since then, which probably means her temperature would have been continuing to rise throughout the night had something not made me go in there. My wife and I can only conclude to this day that the ghost of the old woman that we are pretty sure is in my grandma's house was the one who got me in there. My grandma's house is over 110 years old, and that holds a lot of history. So to this day, we're thankful to this ghost or happening, or whatever you want to call it, and are quite certain that whatever it was, it saved our child's life. I'm not a religious person either. Frankly, I almost despise most of the big ones. But I do believe in miracles, and those miracles are the reason my family and I even exist. My grandmother was ran over by an automobile with those old-timey thick wheels. I don't think they were made of rubber yet. Anyways, they take her inside, and the whole town, including the doctor, gather to her bedside and say their last goodbyes. Then she gets out of bed like nothing happened. And her seemingly crushed chest appears to be fine. Everyone in the area celebrates her, and they kind of make this child of sort of mascot of the local church. For lack of a better term, she lived a very long and happy life. My brother was saved by a friggin' ghost. My dad, who is a very serious person, told me both these stories, and I believe him. When my father and mother were young, my parents were staying at my grandparents' house briefly. They were sleeping on the pallet bed on the floor. During the night, my infant brother had crawled under this pallet and was being suffocated by the weight of the mattress. My dad was suddenly awoken by a glowing person who told him to look under the bed. I myself am constantly inundated with weird coincidences almost every week. Something is steering me into these instances. I love listening to my instincts. I've always been guilty and kind of depressed about the financial and sometimes emotional burden I put on my immediate family by being unsuccessful and lazy. Lately, I've realized that I may have recently saved my mother and father's lives, and that I did indeed have a purpose or reason for being born. I was in the right place at the right time, listening to the right podcast when I suddenly found the key to saving my father's bladder from being taken by cancer. Motherfucking broccoli sprouts, yo. For real, look it up. 41% effective against male types of cancers. The lining of his bladder was red and cancerous, and after many scrapings and chemotherapy treatments, they were finally going to take his bladder after one more bad checkup. I got him on these sprouts, and suddenly it was all gone. Our multi-year fight was over. You can also do intermittent fasting, and that has an amazing effect, where basically the cancer cells can't feed themselves at night, and you're not giving them food and they die. It's almost as effective as chemo, and you obviously do it with chemotherapy for spectacular results. Again, I was in the right place at the right time, listening to the right doctor on the right podcast. Explain how the ketogenic diet prevents Alzheimer's. And based on my grandmother's vegetable-like state, my mother was headed down a dark hole in a few years if she didn't start doing something soon. My mother hugged me for the other morning, telling me that I probably did save her life by getting her on this diet and coaching her through it. My life meant something to other people. I wasn't just taking up space all this time, draining those around me for resources. I feel relief.